Commander Zarkon stared at the glowing thermal monitors in absolute, paralyzing dread. Sector 4 was completely dark. The emergency bulkheads had sealed, but it was already too late. Something was inside the engineering deck. It wasn't a pirate. It wasn't a rogue military drone. It was a fully grown adult Vexian Shadow-Stalker, a purely biological, hyperlethal apex predator. 400 pounds of dark, rippling muscle, razor-sharp bone plating, and a jaw pressure capable of snapping starship cables. It possessed zero cybernetics, just pure, terrifying evolutionary perfection. And trapped inside that pitch-black engineering deck was Maya, a human. Humans were classified as a Category 2 species by the Intergalactic Coalition. Soft, unarmored, lacking natural venom or claws. They were mechanics, builders. They were not fighters. Over the comms on the bridge, Zarkon could hear the terrifying, wet clicking of the Shadow-Stalker's mandibles. It was hunting. Open the exterior airlocks, Zarkon whispered, his multifaceted alien eyes wide with sorrow. Vent Sector 4 completely into the void. It is the only way to kill the beast before it breaches the upper decks. Sir, his lieutenant stammered, his blue skin turning pale. The human engineer is still alive. Her biometric feed is currently active. Not for long, Zarkon replied grimly. A Shadow-Stalker does not play with its food. It is already over. Down in the suffocating darkness of Sector 4, Maya was backed against the primary coolant pipe. She was covered in heavy black grease, her breathing ragged but shockingly controlled. She didn't have a plasma rifle. She didn't have a kinetic energy shield. She just had a heavy, solid steel hydro spanner gripped tightly in her right hand. In the shadows, just beyond her limited human vision, the beast circled. It moved with terrifying fluid grace. A ghost made entirely of claws and teeth. The Shadow-Stalker let out a low, bone-rattling hiss that caused the metal floor grates to vibrate violently. It was a biological, acoustic frequency specifically designed to paralyze prey with sheer terror. But Maya didn't freeze. She slowly raised her steel wrench. "Come on, you ugly bastard," she muttered, her voice dripping with a dangerous, unnatural calm. Over the comms, Zarkon and his bridge crew listened in horrified silence. The human was trying to taunt a cosmic nightmare. It was absolute suicide. Then the beast struck. It was a blur of dark muscle. The Shadow-Stalker lunged across the 20-foot gap in a fraction of a second, its massive jaws snapping open to reveal 3 rows of serrated, venom-dripping fangs. Maya swung the heavy steel wrench with all her might, aiming directly for the creature's thick skull. She missed. The beast's massive jaws violently clamped down entirely over Maya's left forearm. The sickening sound of tearing flesh and grinding bone echoed loudly over the open comms channel. The alien bridge crew flinched, bracing for the inevitable, agonizing death screams of the fragile human. They expected her to beg. They expected her to collapse in a weeping pile of broken biology. What happened next completely shattered their understanding of the universe. Maya didn't scream in terror. She didn't cry. She let out a primal, guttural roar of absolute, unhinged fury. The pain didn't break her. It ignited an ancient, terrifying evolutionary instinct buried deep within human DNA. "You bite me?" Maya roared into the pitch-black deck. "I bite back." Dropping the useless wrench, Maya violently grabbed the massive beast by the thick, fleshy ridges above its glowing eyes. She yanked the terrifying apex predator forward, completely ignoring the agonizing pain in her trapped arm. And then the unarmored, fragile Category 2 human opened her mouth, bared her blunt omnivore teeth, and viciously bit down directly onto the Shadow-Stalker's sensitive facial nerve cluster. She bit down hard, and she violently tore her head back. A terrifying, high-pitched shriek of absolute agony suddenly erupted over the comms. But it wasn't the human screaming. The agonizing, high-pitched shriek of the Vexian Shadow-Stalker echoed violently through the ship's comms. On the bridge, Commander Zarkon physically recoiled. His mandibles clicked in rapid, uncontrolled confusion. That was not a human scream. That was the sound of a cosmic apex predator experiencing something it had never felt in its entire evolutionary history: sheer, unadulterated terror. Down in the suffocating darkness of Sector 4, the massive beast violently thrashed. Its heavy, armored body slammed against the bulkheads, desperately trying to dislodge the unarmored primate attached to its face. But Maya did not let go. Her left forearm was still trapped within the creature's razor-sharp jaws, her blood soaking into her dark engineering coveralls. The pain was blinding, white-hot, and absolute, but the human brain is a terrifying biological engine. When pushed beyond the brink of survival, it shuts off the pain receptors. It floods the nervous system with a highly volatile, completely toxic chemical cocktail called adrenaline. Maya wasn't a fragile Category 2 species anymore. She was a cornered Deathworlder. And cornered Deathworlders do not die quietly. With her teeth still sunken deep into the creature's sensitive optical nerve cluster, Maya tasted the thick, acidic, glowing blue blood of the Shadow-Stalker. The beast roared, a sound of pure panic. It violently whipped its massive head backward, finally tearing itself free from the human's vicious grip. The sudden kinetic force threw Maya backward. She crashed heavily into a steel-reinforced coolant tank, sliding down to the cold metal deck. Silence instantly fell heavily over the dark engineering bay. On the bridge, the vital signs monitor flared a brilliant warning red. "Commander!" The lieutenant gasped, his voice trembling violently. The human's heart rate is skyrocketing. It is currently operating at 180 beats per minute. Her cardiovascular system should be completely failing under that stress. But she is standing back up. In the pitch blackness of Sector 4, the massive Shadow-Stalker retreated into the shadows. It was bleeding profoundly from its face. Its primary sensory cluster was severely damaged by blunt, crushing human teeth. The apex predator of the cosmos was suddenly deeply, profoundly confused. Prey was supposed to run. Prey was supposed to freeze. Prey was absolutely not supposed to rip your face open with its bare mouth. Maya slowly pushed herself up from the cold floor. Her left arm hung loosely at her side, the flesh mangled and dripping crimson blood onto the metal grating. She didn't look at it. She didn't care. Her eyes were locked onto the glowing blue blood trailing off into the darkness. She spat a mouthful of acidic alien blood onto the floor. It sizzled loudly against the metal. "Is that all you've got?" Maya whispered, her voice rough, primal, and echoing through the dark bay. The Shadow-Stalker let out a low, uncertain hiss from the far corner of the room. It was assessing the threat. The creature's highly advanced predatory instincts were suddenly screaming at it to retreat. This was no longer a hunt. This was a territorial deathmatch against an unknown, highly aggressive biological anomaly. The massive beast slowly backed away toward the heavy engineering bay doors. It needed to escape. It needed to hunt much easier, softer prey on the upper decks. Maya noticed the creature's subtle, retreating movement toward the exit. She slowly reached over to the manual engineering override terminal with her good, blood-soaked right hand. "Oh no, you don't." Maya growled, a terrifying, blood-stained smile slowly spreading across her face. She slammed her palm onto the absolute lockdown sequence. The heavy blast doors behind the massive, terrifying alien predator hissed loudly and locked shut with a deafening final clunk. The Shadow-Stalker violently whipped its massive head around, staring at the sealed exit in sheer shock. Maya picked her heavy steel hydrospanner back up from the floor, her grip ironclad. "I'm not locked in here with you," the human engineer whispered, taking a slow, deliberate step forward into the dark. "You're locked in here with me." On the primary bridge, Commander Zarkon watched the tactical holographic display turn entirely crimson. The absolute lockdown protocol was fully engaged. A frail, unarmored Category 2 human had just deliberately sealed herself inside a pitch-black steel box with a Vexian Shadow-Stalker. She trapped it," the lieutenant whispered, his multifaceted eyes wide with uncomprehending horror. "Why didn't she run?" The emergency ventilation shafts were completely open. She could have escaped, Because she is not running, Zarkon replied, his voice trembling violently as a terrifying realization washed over his alien mind. She is hunting. Down in the suffocating darkness of Sector 4, the Shadow-Stalker finally realized it was permanently cornered. It let out a deafening metallic screech and slammed its massive, razor-sharp claws violently against the heavily sealed blast doors. The reinforced titanium held firm. It whipped its heavy, armored head around, its glowing optical sensors frantically scanning the dark bay for the bleeding primate. But Maya was completely gone. The beast crept forward, its padded feet completely silent against the cold metal grating. It tasted the stagnant air. It could easily smell the rich, iron-heavy scent of human blood dripping from Maya's severely mangled arm. It slowly tracked the crimson scent toward the massive, heavily shielded plasma manifolds in the exact center of the room. Suddenly, a heavy steel hydrospanner clattered loudly against the floorboards directly behind it. The beast spun with terrifying speed, its massive jaws snapping violently at the empty air. Nothing was there. It was a calculated, deliberate decoy. Before the massive predator could properly reorient, the heavy emergency pressure valve directly above it violently ruptured. Maya had quietly climbed the high-maintenance scaffolding in the pitch blackness with only one good arm. She ruthlessly slammed her bloodied fist into the manual release valve. A blinding, deafening jet of supercooled liquid nitrogen violently erupted directly onto the beast below. The Shadow-Stalker shrieked in absolute agony as the freezing liquid instantly crystallized the ambient moisture on its dense, obsidian armor. The incredibly rapid temperature drop severely crippled its advanced biological thermal camouflage system. It was no longer a terrifying, invisible ghost hiding in the shadows. It was entirely covered in glowing, crackling white frost, completely exposed in the dim, flashing emergency lights. Maya dropped gracefully from the high scaffolding, landing heavily on the metal deck with a loud thud. Her mangled left arm was tied incredibly tightly with a greasy strip of her own torn coveralls, a brutal makeshift tourniquet that had completely stopped her bleeding. She didn't have advanced plasma weapons or kinetic shielding, so she forcefully made the massive starship her weapon. The freezing alien predator lunged forward blindly, deeply desperate and genuinely terrified of the small mammal. It violently swung its massive, scythe-like tail, aiming to brutally sweep the fragile human's legs out from under her. Maya didn't dodge. She brutally stomped her heavy, steel-toed engineering boot directly onto the creature's freezing, brittle tail tip. The hyperdense alien bone violently snapped like dry wood under the human's heavy, uncaring heel. The terrified bridge crew listened to the sickening crunch of alien bone over the open comms channel. They fully expected the beast to retaliate with absolute, lethal force. Instead, the audio feed picked up a pathetic, whimpering sound that chilled Commander Zarkon to his very core. The massive, 400-pound apex predator of the cosmos was frantically scrambling backward, its claws slipping helplessly on the bloody metal deck. It was openly whining in pure, biological fear. "Hey!" Maya's cold, exhausted, and incredibly dangerous voice echoed over the channel. "I didn't say you could leave yet." Then, the massive primary plasma reactor in the center of the room began to critically overload, suddenly bathing the entire engineering bay in a blinding, lethal red light. The blaring siren of a critical plasma reactor overload should signify absolute, inescapable doom. For any normal Category 2 species, it was a definitive cue to make peace with the ancestors. But for Maya, a human engineer covered in heavy grease and glowing alien blood, it just meant she finally had some decent lighting. The massive engineering bay was instantly bathed in a blinding, pulsating crimson glow. The ambient temperature in Sector 4 began skyrocketing at a terrifying, exponential rate. On the bridge, Commander Zarkon gripped his tactical console, his multifaceted alien eyes locked onto the violently rising thermal indicators in sheer, unadulterated panic. She engaged the manual reactor override. The lieutenant shrieked, his blue skin turning completely ash-gray. "The core is going critical." The human is going to vaporize the entire lower half of the starship just to ensure the beast dies. No, Zarkon whispered, his voice completely hollow and reverent. He stared unblinkingly at the human's biometric feed. Her violently spiking heart rate was actually beginning to stabilize. She is a Terran engineer. She knows exactly what she is doing. She isn't destroying the ship. She is using it as an anvil. Down in the violently glowing red bay, the massive Vexian Shadow-Stalker was trapped in a living biological nightmare. Just moments ago, it had been brutally flash-frozen by liquid nitrogen. Now, the overwhelming, blistering, radiant heat of the intentionally overloading plasma core was violently crashing into its sub-zero, crystallized armor. The rapid, extreme temperature shift caused catastrophic thermal shock. The beast's hyperdense obsidian bone plating, biologically designed to withstand military-grade kinetic rifle rounds, began to violently crack and splinter with loud, deafening, gunshot-like pops. The apex predator of the cosmos screamed. It was a pathetic, agonizing sound of utter, humiliating defeat. It desperately threw its massive, 400-pound body against the heavily sealed titanium blast doors, completely ignoring the fragile human it had ruthlessly hunted just minutes prior. It just wanted to escape the blistering heat. It just wanted to survive the terrifying primate. Maya stood perfectly still amidst the blaring sirens and rising white steam, watching the cosmic nightmare desperately scratch at the exit like a terrified, trapped rodent. Her mangled left arm throbbed with blinding, white-hot agony. The adrenaline was slowly starting to wear off, brutally replaced by the heavy, exhausting reality of extreme blood loss. But her dark, predatory eyes never left the whimpering beast. "You came into my house," Maya whispered. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the deafening reactor alarms with terrifying ice-cold clarity. She reached out with her good right hand and grabbed a heavy, severed main power cable dangling from a ruptured ceiling console. The thick, exposed copper wiring sparked violently with raw, unfiltered electrical current. The Shadow-Stalker turned its cracked, bleeding head toward her. Its glowing optical sensors flickered with absolute, undeniable dread. It pressed its massive back entirely against the sealed door, actively shrinking away from the small, unarmored primate. "You tore my arm," Maya continued, taking a slow, heavy step forward. Lethal blue sparks showered around her boots like a terrifying halo of pure kinetic energy. "You thought I was soft. You thought I was prey." The beast let out a low, vibrating whimper, physically shielding its ruined face with its massive, trembling forelimbs. "But on Earth," Maya growled, her lips pulling back into a bloody, terrifying, purely predatory smile, "we don't just survive the monsters in the dark." Without a single moment of hesitation, Maya violently whipped the sparking, high-voltage power cable directly into the pooling puddle of acidic, highly conductive alien blood spreading rapidly beneath the creature's feet. The electrical reaction was absolutely instantaneous. The raw, unfiltered electrical current of a dreadnought-class starship hit the highly conductive alien blood with a blinding, thunderous crack. 10,000 volts of pure, unadulterated kinetic energy violently surged directly into the Vexian Shadow-Stalker. The apex predator's massive, 400-pound body instantly seized. Its heavily muscled limbs locked in absolute, agonizing paralysis. The creature's hyperdense obsidian armor, already catastrophically fractured by the brutal thermal shock of freezing nitrogen and blistering reactor heat, could not contain the violently expanding biological pressure. The air in Sector 4 filled with the sickening, deafening sound of an indestructible cosmic nightmare being fundamentally unmade. On the bridge, the audio comms completely blew out in a violent screech of static. Commander Zarkon's primary heart skipped a beat. The blaring crimson reactor alarms abruptly ceased. The violent, rising thermal indicators on the tactical display instantly flatlined. Then absolute, terrifying silence swallowed the engineering bay. "The power feed." The lieutenant whispered, his multifaceted eyes locked onto the black screens. "The primary reactor core is spinning down. The manual override was canceled at the absolute last possible microsecond. And the human, Zarkon choked out, dreading the inevitable answer. No Category 2 biological form could survive that level of proximity to a raw electrical discharge. The biometric feed flickered. A single, steady green line pulsed rhythmically on the dark monitor. 110 beats per minute. Calm. Controlled. Alive. Disengage the lockdown, Zarkon ordered, his alien voice shaking with an emotion he had never felt in his entire military career. Deploy the elite Vanguard Heavy Squad to Sector 4 immediately. When the heavily armored Vanguard shock troopers finally forced the smoking, warped titanium blast doors open, their heavy plasma rifles were raised and glowing. They expected to find pieces of the humans scattered across the bay. They expected to find the beast wounded and enraged. Instead, their tactical flashlights pierced the thick, acrid black smoke to reveal a sight that would be permanently burned into the galactic military archives forever. In the absolute center of the ruined engineering deck lay the charred, broken, and completely lifeless husk of the Vexian Shadow-Stalker. The unstoppable monster of the dark void was utterly destroyed, and sitting casually on top of the creature's massive, ruined skull was Maya. Her engineering coveralls were scorched and soaked in glowing acidic blood. Her severely mangled left arm was tightly bound in a makeshift, bloody tourniquet. Her face was smeared with dark grease and soot. She wasn't weeping. She wasn't in shock. She was casually using a small, flickering plasma spark igniter to weld a broken piece of her hydrospanner back together. The elite alien soldiers, trained to fear absolutely nothing, slowly lowered their weapons in sheer mind-shattering awe. Commander Zarkon stepped through the Vanguard line, his boots crunching loudly on the shattered obsidian armor of the dead beast. He looked at the fragile, unarmored primate, unable to fully comprehend the absolute biological impossibility sitting before him. "Engineer Maya," Zarkon whispered reverently. How did you terminate a Class 9 Apex Predator with zero kinetic weaponry?" Maya slowly looked up. Her eyes were dark, cold, and profoundly human. "I told you, Commander," Maya replied, her voice steady and echoing through the silent, smoking bay. "On Earth, we don't run from the things that go bump in the dark." She spat a final drop of glowing alien blood onto the floor. "We turn on the lights and kill them." Zarkon slowly reached for his command datapad. With a trembling claw, he accessed the Intergalactic Coalition Species Registry. He deleted the Category 2 classification next to humanity's name. He typed a single, terrifying new designation: